In this video, I will give a representation of the dates of the Pauline letters. This will include the mainstream consensus, the deficiencies of the model, and a brief representation of the external evidence. There are basically two arguments that are used to give dates for the writings of Paul in the New Testament. First, scholars take the model presented in the book of Acts and assume that it is a factual representation of Paul, and if it is factual, then Paul's travels can be dated. Theologians then assume that these dates given by the book of Acts yield accurate dates for the authorship of Paul, and using this concept, you get very early dates. This is the primary model that theological scholars use to date Paul. For the second argument, scholars point to one other aspect in Paul that they claim proves early authorship, primarily that the temple destruction in 70 is never mentioned by Paul. Scholars claim that if Paul knew of the destruction of the temple, he would have written about it. That argument isn't exactly strong, but it fits inside their model. So that basically is the entire argument for the Pauline dates. Their entire argument is based on these two ideas. Immediately, however, we notice a problem. They assume Acts is factual, yet if you talk to the biblical scholars, the consensus on Acts is that it is not accurate. Even theologians don't claim that the book of Acts is some version of history, so how is it that this account can be the sole source of dating for the Pauline letters? In short, the book of Acts is an unreliable dating source, and if you try and find any other support, you find that the book of Acts is their only source for dating. External sources at best point to authorship of the Pauline letters, and the book of Luke and Acts no later than 120 to 140 CE with the religion of Marcion, but that's nearly a century after the assumed traditional dates. Before this period, the evidence goes to absolute zero. There is no external evidence before this period, and if you dive further into the religion of Marcion, you find that there is strong circumstantial evidence that points to all the Pauline letters, the Gospel of Luke, and the book of Acts being created here. The Pauline letters particularly reflect the style of Polycarp, a follower of Marcion. Everything we know about Polycarp indicates that his style is exactly the same as the style of the Pauline letters. It's so similar that the question has been raised before, was Polycarp trying to be Paul? Yet the Paul dates go dead before Polycarp. It's just as likely that Polycarp wrote the Pauline letters himself. There is nothing in the Pauline letters that is inconsistent with creation during this period. Absolutely nothing. As bad as their first argument is, the second argument is even worse. They claim that if the temple were destroyed, Paul would have mentioned it. However, if you read the Pauline letters, you notice that nowhere does Paul ever mention the temple, either existing or destroyed. In fact, Paul constantly describes a metaphorical temple concept where people make up the temple. He doesn't describe an actual temple one way or another. So Paul never mentions the temple, and this would be very consistent with a post-70 philosophy. In fact, his idea that people don't need a physical temple is completely consistent with post-70 authorship. And another major theme in the Pauline letters is that the religion is not entirely for the Jews. This was a major theme of the Marcion religion. The religion of Marcion is sometimes considered the first anti-Semitic religion, and again, this is very consistent with post-70 authorship. Nothing about the Pauline letters supports an early date. In fact, all the indicators are post-70, and with external evidence, the first major support for dating Paul comes from the Marcionites, a proto-Orthodox religion. Given the religion of Marcion, we can say with relative certainty that most of the Pauline letters existed between 120 and 140, but we can't date them earlier. There is nothing to indicate earlier authorship. These dates are based on wishful thinking. They are based on a model that is horribly deficient. The evidence of these dates does not exist. It's a dead end, and it's pure fiction. That these dates have made it into the mainstream, that these dates represent a consensus, is very unfortunate. These dates are not accurate. These dates represent a very bad guess with zero support from external evidence.